Welcome to Startup Different. I'm Dave, your Chief Podcast Officer. With me is my brother and podcast sidekick, Chris. We're two successful entrepreneurs paying it forward by debunking startup myths, tackling the toughest challenges, and giving you the tools to build your business. As a founder, you'll have an idea about where you'll want to highlight your product to prospective customers. Whether that's social media, trade shows, or inbound tactics, you'll have a hunch as to the how and where you'd like to meet your customers in the market. Here's the thing though, what's best for you isn't always what's best for your prospective customers. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Startup Different. I am your Chief Podcast Officer, David. And my good friend, brother, co-founder, and other guy on the podcast, Chris, is also here. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Dave.
How you doing?
How's it going? Good.
I'm good. How was your weekend? What'd you get up to?
Pretty good. I watched the Grey Cup game last night.
The championship of the Canadian Football League. Fantastic. Right. I mean, yeah. I know it's just so popular, what with its odd rules, fewer downs, and generally more frustrating, more punts, a lot of punts in the game. So.
Yeah, exactly. Big field, lot of space out there for those players to run.
How many rouges was scored, huh?
I'm not even sure what that is, but I don't think there were any as far as I can recall. I should know that. I played football. Like I should know what a rouge is.
It's a touchback. It's when you kneel in the end zone but it's not a safety. You know what I mean? It's like when you get punted to. Anyway, I think that's a rouge.
We just called it a touchback. I don't know.
I know. I think it has more than one name. You remember years ago, Doug Flutie did that thing when he was the backup for New England, and he there's some obscure play in football where if you bounce the ball off the ground and then kick that ball through the uprights, you get 2 points, I think.
Yeah.
And he did it. Yeah. It was like this super obscure, bizarre. I remember the players just going nuts though.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing ever. Cool.
I never really it's been a long time since I've been into the CFL. I didn't even watch the game. Who won? Actually,
Montreal won, and being that Toronto wasn't in it, Montreal's next closest. Winnipeg's a lot further away, so it was Montreal and Winnipeg, and it was a really thrilling game. Montreal came back and won it at the end. It was great. So happy for our friends down the highway.
Yeah, magnifique. It just has been so long since I've been in the sport. I think I was watching it back in 2015. I remember we went to a game after work one time. And that was pretty fun. It was just us. So it was, we're talking really early days. And I remember a lot of the things that we were focusing on back then was, how do we get more customers? I remember that being the thing I thought about basically constantly during that time, And
I think at that point too, I think we might have had one or two other employees, and I think we were trying to do the inbound marketing thing. Mm-hmm. So the whole HubSpot idea, write blog posts and draw in readers from that, and then they convert into paying customers. Hopefully, if you do everything just right. Except it didn't go so great for us, did it?
No, it fell totally flat. And unfortunately, it was just one of those things where it was, you want to believe it's this easy thing to find your customer in the market. You've got a product, you probably have a first customer, maybe you got a couple of customers, and then you kind of okay, how do we get this thing to the next level? What is it going to take in terms of marketing channel? And it's really tempting to believe there's a silver bullet out there, and the single way you can do it to kind of get you to the end zone. Let's go back to our football situation. But the reality is that just doesn't really work. And it's quite a journey to actually figure out how to reach those customers. I think
we learned this the hard way too. Yeah. We were really averse. I think we, maybe in our heart of hearts, we knew what the way our customers wanted us to kind of connect with them. But we just didn't want to work that way. We kind of wanted to believe that an inbound marketing approach would work. I kind of remember
you want to believe that one approach will work, of a single, this way will get us right to the end zone, as opposed to more complex marketing mix. Everybody's looking for the easy answer to startup success.
Yeah, I think it was, I remember when we kind of had our culture failure and we were trying to sort of reset and, like find hip office space and kind of build a cool culture and all that sort of stuff. I think we had a terrible meeting with a business incubator here in Toronto. And basically the whole meeting went sideways. We gave them our pitch. They just hated it. They told us it was going to be like a lifestyle business or something like that. It just went totally south. I think the guy who had said all that stuff was like a former BlackBerry, employee, which ironically isn't exactly the greatest example of entrepreneurship anymore.
And it wasn't back then either. That was like 2015.
No.
I feel like BlackBerry's heyday was like 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
I bet people listening to this today don't even know like what a BlackBerry is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, after that guy basically told us that our business idea was not worth doing, he left the call. And I think there was another person that kind of like out of pity just decided to chat with us for the rest of the scheduled time.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we actually got one of our best like pieces of advice for our business and how to market to our customers. Do you want to tell that part of the story?
Yeah, I think it was, kind of like the last 5 minutes of the call made up for the first 5 minutes of the call sort of thing. but basically, yeah, they were content to just keep talking to us. And I remember this, they gave us this sort of like a key feedback on our like go-to-market strategy, which was you need to sell to your customers how they want to be sold to. And it's a simple idea, it's kind of obvious, but sometimes in business, it's hard to see the forest from the trees. But it's a simple idea. People and organizations have certain ways of evaluating and buying your product, your stuff, and it's on you and your business to meet them in those places and be ready with like a compelling offer. But the rub to this is that you don't know where they are in the market. Like you don't actually know how to meet them there. Like you're new to the market as well, right? If you're a startup, you might have a product too that's also in kind of like a newer space. Like for us, we made these mobile safety apps, for public safety at these universities and colleges. It, we weren't even necessarily sure who the main person was that we'd be selling to. Even at our first customers, 4 or 5 different people with different titles.
Sometimes it was a committee too.
Oh, it was always a committee.
It was like, yeah, there's always a whole bunch of people you have to convince. Yeah,
right. And so I guess like that's the really the difficult part here is that you just don't know. And it's one of those startup myths, that you're going to believe as a founder because you're right in it. You've got blinders on. You're going to believe that your product is so awesome that it will, somehow sell itself. Or secondly, that there's some sort of, this is like maybe an adjacent myth to it, that there's going to be ever a silver bullet in marketing that's going to take your business from zero to hero. You really need to go out there and figure this out systematically and find out how your customers and where they want to be sold to. And that was a big challenge.
When I kind of think about that market that we were working with, we didn't really want to do probably 2 of the big things that was kind of key to the way that our customers bought. And those, you might have others, but the 2 that come to mind to me is the first one being, we didn't really want to go to trade show and do like put up a booth and, kind of do the whole boothing experience at trade shows, when in reality, for a lot of our prospective clients, like that's where they went to learn about products in the industry. And it was actually really important. And I think we did a few of them, and then we kind of took a hiatus from it. We didn't do any trade shows for a while, and it just dried up the sales funnel. So that was kind of like, I don't know if you'd call that lead generation or what, Dave, but that was actually really important. Yeah. And then the second piece that we really shied away from was we didn't want to respond to RFPs or requests for proposal, because they were a ton of work. You could spend weeks on it and then find out you lost, and then you didn't get anything out of it. But to be honest with you, it was critical because we were dealing with mostly universities, and they have purchasing departments, and the way they buy everything is by going out to RFP and having vendors compete
over a certain threshold. I mean, we'll get more into that in a minute, but I do. I guess I just want to address some of the data behind this too. Is like before we go down just how we did it, because I do think that's obviously important, and we actually have kind of an interesting strategy of how we attacked this particular conundrum. But I guess I want to say that what I said earlier in terms of like understanding that that's the myth, that you need to actually like figure this out, and it's not just going to happen on its own. like the data behind this is that about 34% of small businesses that fail lack the proper, product market fit, and 22% of them fail because they don't have a sound marketing strategy at all. It's a big group when you kind of put that together. And the end game here is that, like, you're going to assume a lot of things, and usually assuming stuff is generally pretty dangerous in business. That's where you're going to get caught up. But I think the main thing here is just understand that this is going to be an effort. And as you're alluding to, Chris, yeah, we had a couple of things where we were just like, on the one hand, we were like, we didn't think we needed to do some of those things. We certainly didn't want to. So for us, it was convenient to be like, well, we're not going to bother doing that because writing RFPs is terrible. I'll give you some data in a few minutes. It's actually crazy, some of that stuff. But I think, I'm totally with you. It was kind of like, we have to do these things. And it's not just do them. We had to be really good at them. That was a big transformation.
I think we had a conversation. We said, look, we don't like these things, but we have to get good at trade shows, and we have to get good at RFPs. Yeah.
It's sort of like a concept, though, like, how do we figure that out? Like, we kind of jump to the end there a little bit, but I want to kind of emphasize, like, this is a process, like everything else that we sort of describe in the pod. Oh, I used pod like really effectively there. Did you hear that? That was awesome. Like all the things we talk about on the pod, we want to apply like systems to our behavior to sort of understand, and frameworks so that we can attack really difficult problems like this. And this is a super difficult, super important problem. And so the first thing I'm going to say, and this is going to sound, some of these are going to sound so obvious, but we'll dig into them, and there's a bit more to them. The first is like, okay, so how do you do this? Well, you got to ask your customers. So that's the first thing. Like, it sounds dumb, but you might have like 5 customers, but you are not your customer, right? You don't understand their average day, their fears, their activities outside of work, all those things that are necessary in the insight, even like who they interact with on a daily basis. And this was particularly tough for us because when we were doing these like institutional level sales, we'd be talking to different stakeholders with different titles at various schools. So we need to understand, like, wait, what is your link to the other departments? Like, who should be making this decision? And what was interesting I think about the end, near the end with AppArmor, how it was always the same title. It actually like almost became really clear because their product was more accepted in the market, that like this is the right stakeholder to make this kind of decision. It was like emergency managers, like 99% of the time by the end of it. But in the early days, we didn't really know. So actually,
we didn't know what an emergency manager was. We were, we were trying to figure it out. We didn't know if that was the right person. Who actually does an emergency manager handle like safety on campus, or is it like the director of security? Things like that were things we just didn't know. Yeah.
And then you, as you sort of accurately stated, so we talked to them, and they told us all about the benefits of these conferences. They kind of were like, they didn't buy anything unless they got FaceTime. They needed FaceTime with you. We actually did video calls like really early on in our business. We did like in 2012, 2013. We were doing any calls we had. I'd be showing my face, or at least doing a demo of the product through like a tool like GoToMeeting or something like that. Before,
I think it was GoToMeeting that we were using
before everybody used Zoom. Like GoToMeeting was like, I guess, the right one to go with. I mean, we were aging ourselves here a bit, but so we kind of learned a lot about that. We learned a lot about the process though too. So we understood that, okay, we need a direct sales force. We need people to go out and do this. We can't just sit in the office. And then it was a question of, okay, what do our salespeople need to be successful? So we armed them to the teeth. They would have, I remember, Chris, you had, I can't claim this, but the prototype idea. Maybe you want to talk about that for a second, and just how that kind of like fleshed out. And that was a sort of big part of what we call like for any of the salespeople listening, a product-led sale. Really important.
Definitely, we wanted to get our customer to get their hands on the actual product. And since it was an app, we really wanted to get the app onto their phone so they could actually touch the buttons, try it out. And what kind of like the side effect was they would then take their phone and walk around and show it to all the other people on the committee or in their department or what have you. And it's very visual then at that point, because those prototypes, we branded them to the school too. They looked pretty good. We were good at kind of, finding the university's branding guide online and translating that into an app. And it worked out really well. I think the uptake was pretty good. Now, sometimes the sales cycle was long, but I think if you looked at the actual close rate, I think it was pretty strong for
it was a no doubter. I remember that was actually so it was one thing finding the customer, but in terms of like closing deals, the customers that had prototypes were way more likely to close. It became a regular part of our business operations. But the other thing that was kind of interesting too, just going back to that, it was sometimes we would ask the customers deliberately, but sometimes you had to read into kind of some of the customer requests. So as an example, Shout out to the good folks at Rob Davis at Mohawk College. And I remember he came to me one day and said, Dave, I really need a PowerPoint deck because I'm trying to explain this to other people here. So the committee, and we, I need just some way of doing that. And so we built him one, but then of course we systematize it. And so then every single time we went to a next sales opportunity, we had more collateral. We had a PowerPoint deck. We had a brochure. We had whatever. They could explain this to everybody, even the most tech savvy people to the least tech savvy people. So in the end, we were creating these champions at every organization. Those champions would have like a minimum level of competency basically guaranteed. You know what I mean? Like we could arm them with whatever they felt most comfortable with so that they could go and give the pitch. So then ultimately we could do the demo and then close the deal later. But it was this like by both asking our customers and sort of like, inferring a little bit more about based on their questions, we understood more about how to attack and meet our customers in the market.
Yeah, that PowerPoint deck became really important actually because we couldn't we weren't actually loading the prototype into the App Store. This was way back in the days when you didn't really have like TestFlight or anything like that. So you had to register the user's like phone ID with Apple, and we had like a limit of like 100 per year. So we were always like worried we were going to run out of those. So it's kind of bad if you can only prospect to 100 potential clients. I think I actually ended up opening like a personal Apple account as well, so that I could get another 100 phones to be able to test on. But where we ran, so we would essentially do a prototype for one device for the client, and then the PowerPoint deck was the thing that actually really got flying around the client's email boxes because they were using that to show it to the rest of the people who didn't really want to spend the time to put it on their phone or give us their ID of their phone, some of those complications. So that PowerPoint deck idea from the folks at Mohawk College was a fantastic idea, and we really ran with it. Yeah.
So that was obviously really important. So asking customers, sort of like listening to your customers. The second piece here is making small bets. And specifically, just putting my marketing hat here on for a second. Let's first, what's a small bet? Like literally putting a small amount of capital, because especially in the early days, you don't have much money anyway. So you really don't want to waste it. It's very easy to take a lot of money and waste it in marketing in like no time. So what you really want to understand is, okay, we want to take a large budget or as big a budget as we can, everything from $5,000 to 500. And we want to put a little bit of it into a series of different things and see what gets us the biggest return. And this is kind of this, and then once you're in categories that work, you iterate in those categories to improve. Maybe it's a banner ad, it looks better. Maybe it's trade shows, you go to more of them, you buy a better booth. You iterate, you improve. You use that MVP approach, that minimum viable product approach, that build, measure, learn, but you do it for a marketing strategy. So for us, we took on a bunch of things. I actually have a list of them here next to me. So we took on like direct mail, like snail mail, and it worked. Surprisingly, it worked really well in the early days. I would get calls and the chief would be like, I got this piece of mail from you, because it was the only piece of mail they were getting. And it was a piece of mail about a mobile app. It was crazy. It was crazy that it worked.
And I think they had like an inbox, like a physical inbox for mail. So we were like the only one in that inbox, whereas their inbox for their email was packed with other stuff they didn't want. So it was a great way to kind of stand out.
And they would call us too. It worked. It was crazy. It worked. We had the inbound marketing, didn't work. We had SEO and like website activities, worked, super important. We had data behind that. Social media didn't work at all. Our buyers couldn't care less. They were on Twitter for news, maybe, but they weren't there to be influenced about purchase decisions. Trade shows, they worked really well. You're like, darn, we're gonna have to go to some trade shows. The sponsorship with trade associations worked okay. Like we had to do them. They weren't the best, but we needed to do them, and it also kind of helped us box out other competitors. Cold emailing and calling worked. Never did cold calls, always cold emails, because people don't like receiving cold calls and people don't like making them. So that was pretty easy. And then referral program we had, that worked pretty well. That was the giant checks that we alluded to. I think that was last week or whatever, a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And then, of course, unfortunately, requests for proposals also worked. So we had like this list, though, that we went through, we evaluated, we understood, we had data behind, we made small bets. And then when those bets worked out, we went big. Yep. And so then, and kind of coming back to your comments earlier, Chris, we kind of figured out there were a couple of things that we didn't like that we had to do. So, I'm just going to call this the do the things you hate, but your customers need section. So, going a bit deeper on the two things, let's talk trade shows and talk RFPs. Chris, why don't you do a little bit on the trade show? Because you were kind of getting into that. And I feel like you have a good, I mean, I can always cover for it too. I've been to a billion of them, but
Yeah, like when I think about it, there was definitely like an evolution of how we did our trade shows. So we started off and we had like barely a sign and we had brochures that we would hand out. We just weren't very prepared. We then evolved to, we got like a fairly good like backdrop that folded down really small and looked good and that sort of stuff. So we could take it. We actually decided we wanted to be able to take the trade show booth with us, which was always actually scary because we had to check it.
Oh man,
it was too
so
big.
many bad stories.
Yeah, and it did happen once where somehow it got separated from us and we didn't.
It was Department of Homeland Security held it for 2 days or something, even though it wasn't remotely dangerous. But anyway,
they left their postcard inside it.
It was nice.
Yeah. Anyways, and we were pretty. We didn't spend a lot of money. Like we would come in like the day of the trade show and like be on the way to like as soon as the trade show was done, we were in a cab heading to the airport to get out of there. So we didn't leave a lot of buffer for anything to go wrong. So it wasn't the greatest idea. I think we evolved eventually and we always shipped our booth ahead and we FedExed it so we could track it and all that sort of stuff. And then we would have a backup trade show booth that if for whatever reason the FedEx one didn't get there, we could take the other one on the plane and roll the dice and hope that Homeland Security didn't want to dismantle it and see what all those tubes were for that trade show sign. So and then eventually we got to the point where we just went big on trade shows and we got like the AppArmor store, which was like a massive, really well done booth that was managed by a third party. They had to ship it all over the country.
And they would install it.
Set it up.
That was amazing. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Cost a fortune, but it worked. It worked really well. So we looked so legit because it was like one of the bigger booths in the entire trade show hall. So it was just like, I always think of that like Simpsons episode when they have the fleet of PETA and Marge looks people look over and go like, oh, look, they don't even look like they need our business. Let's buy from them. So it was kind of like we were getting to that point. Yeah.
And so, I think the key there though, too, was when we went big, we had built systems. We had built systems to be really good at trade shows. And I remember our first, I think in 1 year, so the 1 year we didn't go to trade shows, we stunted our growth. We noticeably had fewer sales. The year after we went to about 6, the year after 15. And after that, I think we went to about 40 or 50. And so I was like, whoa, like we had really figured it out, gone big, understood what worked. And then we were placing more bets on, okay, would this trade show have a good return? Or what about this one? Or what about that one? Because there's an infinite number of trade shows. So also understanding which ones are good or bad was an important part of that process. And then the second piece I'll take, which is these RFPs, these requests for proposals. So they're just terrible. No one likes them. Businesses don't like answering them and committees hate evaluating them. I found some data on this. So according to a major RFP software platform, writing an RFP response takes an average of 32 hours to complete. 32 hours. The average proposal the average contains 77 questions per RFP. So if you do some quick arithmetic on that, if you've got 3 proposals on the go, which isn't unusual, then you're staring down the barrel of 96 hours and 231 questions worth of work.
And they're not true-false questions.
No, they're not easy.
They're like all long answer. They're all like, explain the architecture of your product. And it's like, okay, that's going to take a while.
The legalese. That's before there's just so much in it, and it's exhausting. Like it's having written most of our RFP responses, it was absolutely brutal, but we went deep on them because we had to, and we got really good at it. So Chris is really good at pinstriping, which is just for the folks at home, like a little bit of extra detail on this, that, or the next thing to look more impressive. And one thing was, we had these special boxes we would ship them in. We would, do some cool collating. We had, really crisp paper. It was like, we were going to send them a really good one. We weren't shipping this thing in an old Amazon box. This was a nice piece of, business, I don't know, I don't want to call it marketing because it's really not marketing, but it was very professional looking, you know.
And literally, it was self-serving. We just wanted to make it so that when they had the stack of all the proposals, ours looked the best. Okay, so like really good paper, really good binding on it. Like Dave said, the box it came with like matched our branding. I think we had stickers made up that like added our logo to the box and that sort of stuff. Like it was all really well thought out, and we put like when in the grand scheme of things, like buying a binding machine or some boxes that match your company color is pretty minimal. But if you're organized enough to do that sort of stuff, it goes a long way, I think, when people are evaluating those RFPs, because you look like the incumbent, you look like the one that doesn't need their business. I think too, ironically, they want to buy from you.
So that's part of it. The other part of it too is like there's a sales part of being good at RFPs, which sounds weird, but it means it's not just like the selling, it's making sure you have strong relationships at the organizations for which you're going for RFPs, because that's going to help you. Like whether long story short, there's going to be another committee there that's making the decision. You better have people on that committee that are on your team. Otherwise it's going to be tough. Not officially, of course, but they just want to know your product and like your company and that kind of thing. And so that's a big part of the process too. And so when we did that, we really invested in all this. And I remember when we first started answering them, like really seriously and professionally, we won like 8 of the first 10 because the market was totally not expecting us. Like those who were answering RFPs kind of knew who was going to be in it. You kind of get into this like routine, and we just blew the doors off it. Like winning 80% is absurd. So it got more competitive once people knew we were in it, but it attributed to some of the biggest wins we had, and were absolutely essential to our growth. So RFPs, also important.
I remember somebody once said to me, sometimes it's not the best product that wins, but it's the best marketed product. I think that's wins.
Steve Jobs. Did Steve Jobs say that to you?
Maybe. Might have been Winston Churchill too.
It's not Winston Churchill. It's usually Winston Churchill, but it's not Winston Churchill. It would be so weird if he said that.
I don't remember who said it, but probably somebody smarter than me.
That's funny. I like that a lot. But no, I think that's true, right? But in our case, I think let's conclude this here, and I think this is a good wrap up point. So best marketed is a good point, because this is all about marketing, and I think how do we get there? How do we understand where to meet our customers in the market? You ask them, you listen to them more intently, you make small bets, and then frankly, you do what they need, even if you hate it, and that is going to probably get you over the line. Where you lose here is you try to force your way, like how you want to operate some of this stuff. If you don't want to go to trade shows, you don't want to do RFPs, okay, but there's a cost to that, and it's very real. So that's one of the things that you'll definitely want to keep track of as you look for your market fit for your product. Chris, any closing thoughts?
No, that's it. I think you just have to lean in on getting good at the things that you don't want to do when it comes to marketing. You just have to figure out a way to get good at those things. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much, folks. That concludes our episode. We will see you next week. And have a great next couple of days. See ya. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.